Now, Donald Trump was back in New York for the US Open in New York City, the bluest of cities in a blue state, and yet he got a better reception than Joe Biden and Kamala Harris get at sporting events.
Move through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, stay.
And here is the president arriving at the men's final and being greeted with loud cheers. You may be shocked by that if you read the media headlines about all the booing and chaos. Then the president signed some hats for fans. Again, this is New York City. That's what's shocking about this. And as POTUS walked through the crowd, chants of USA went up. Funny how that really doesn't seem to happen too much with Democrat leaders. As for the man who would go on to be crowned US Open champion, Carlos Alcaraz, he said it would be a privilege for the US Open to have the president attend.
For me, playing in front of him, so to be honest, I will try not to be focused and I will try not to think about it. I don't want myself to be nervous because of it. So, but I think, attending the tennis match, I think is great for tennis to have the president into the final.
Joining me now is Newsweek's Senior Editor-at-Large and Article 3 Project Senior Counsel Josh Hammer. Josh, again, we see a big difference between the media narrative and reality.
Yeah, Rita, the crazy thing is I actually watched this entire tennis match. I'm actually a lifelong big tennis fan. Once upon a time, back in the day, I actually interned for the U.S. Tennis Association and worked at the 2009 U.S. Open myself. So I'm a longtime big fan of the sport. I watched this entire match between Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner from beginning to end. And I was struck, Rita, that at least here in the United States, so ABC, the parent company of ESPN, was televising this. They did not show Donald Trump a single time during the match. They showed him in the pre-match singing of the national anthem, and then they showed him again after the match was over. They showed him applauding Alcaraz, who defeated Sinner in 4 sets. They literally not a single time showed him, which is crazy because they were showing all the other celebrities there. There was Bruce Springsteen. There was Steph Curry, the NBA player there. There was Ben Stiller, the actor.
Incredible.
I mean, it's a very star-studded tournament. They never showed the president. The most important man in the world is sitting right there, by the way, flanked by Steve Witkoff, Pam Bondi, other pretty important people. They didn't show him a single time there. So, I mean, if you didn't know any better, if you weren't on social media, if you weren't looking in the comment section, so to speak, you would have thought that it was a total nothing burger, that this guy, Donnie from Queens shows up there, the camera shows him once there. It's totally crazy stuff. But the reality is he is very popular in New York City right now. Donald Trump is a native son, not just of New York City, but of the borough, Queens, where the U.S. Open actually is held there. And this is Donald Trump's appeal, is that, again, he's the Fifth Avenue blue-collar billionaire. He's the guy who will roll in here, and he's going to have a very nice suit there. He's going to look professional there. But the working man resonates him in a way that no president really up until this time, I think, in American history has, Rita. That was very much on display. I'm not going to predict that New York State is going to go red anytime soon or anything like that. What I am saying is that Donald Trump is a very, very different kind of Republican. We saw that yet again in the U.S. Open on Sunday.
Josh, I can tell you the coverage here in Australia is uniformly that there was booing and chaos at the US Open. And it is frustrating to see any coverage of Trump or US politics in this country and many others is pretty poor. But surprisingly, Donald Trump himself thinks the media is improving, except for that bit of fake news they spread recently.
We'll say goodbye to the press, but it's an honor to have you. And actually, the press has been very good lately, except for one rumor that they spread. I did about 8 press conferences in a row, day after day after day. Then I missed one because I was in the Oval Office. And I also went out to a club because I had meetings at a club. And they saw that I was and the rumor started spreading, this horrible rumor that Trump is no longer with us.
But whatever goodwill was built with the media, it may have been undone by this particularly stupid question from an NBC reporter.
Fake news. When you say that, darling, that's fake news.
Well, why would you the Department of Defense?
Listen, be quiet. Listen. You don't listen. You never listen. That's why you're second rate. We're not going to war. We're going to clean up our cities. We're going to clean them up so they don't kill 5 people every weekend. That's not war. That's common sense.
There you go. Second-rate reporter asking a silly question. But on the broader topic, Josh, going into Chicago, what's that going to look like? Is it going to be welcomed by locals? Because, again, Chicago, bluest of blue cities, has been under Democrat rule for decades.
Rita, you want to talk about a war zone in the United States? Let's talk about the city of Chicago. I called Chicago home for 3 years. I went to law school in Chicago. I went to University of Chicago, which is actually on the south side of Chicago. It's in the neighborhood of Hyde Park, which is relatively kind of sort of okay. But if you step 1 foot outside of Hyde Park, where I lived for multiple years, you are essentially in an urban war zone. It is absolutely horrific. The murder rate in Chicago, last I checked, was around 22.5 per 100,000 people there. That is roughly 4 to 5 times the murder rate of New York City. And New York City has actually gone tremendously downhill since Rudy Giuliani and Michael Bloomberg left, given Bill de Blasio. And Eric Adams cleaned up a little bit there. But look, the point is that Chicago is literally as bad as it gets. So Donald Trump has a massive order on his hands. If he actually is dedicated to try to turn things around there, I think he should do so. I think that is worth it because Chicago is actually a beautiful American city. It's an iconic American city. There's so much rich history there. There is beautiful architecture. There's incredible culture. The people are charming Midwesterners. There is a lot, I think, that is worth saving about the city of Chicago. And the number one thing, Rita, that I think is worth noting on this topic, that the people who most want Donald Trump to do this are Chicagoans themselves. Do not believe your lying eyes. The media is saying, oh my God, the people are saying, don't come in here, feds there. We trust Chicago Police Department. Really? You trust the Chicago Police Department, one of the most infamously corrupt police departments, corrupt and incompetent police departments in the entire country? You don't want the feds to come in there? If you actually go in on a hot microphone, if you kind of do these man-on-the-street interviews in Englewood and various other Southside Chicago towns, I guarantee you, they will be clamoring from the top of their lungs to get any help by all means necessary, period, full stop, end of story there. So Donald Trump is actually doing something that I think will be very favorable in the eyes of Chicagoans. I think Chicago is a world-class city that should be made great again. I think that Donald Trump is on his way to doing exactly that.
Now to one of the most shocking stories of the year. This horrific murder was caught on camera. The brutality, the depravity of it is beyond anything I can adequately describe. We will not show the full footage, not even blurred, but just watching the lead up to this senseless crime is chilling. Here you'll see a young woman, a Ukrainian woman, her name's Irina, and she boards a train in North Carolina. She is on her phone, has AirPods in, is minding her own business, and there is no interaction with her murderer, who slowly pulls out a knife and then launches a vicious attack, leaving her bleeding to death as he walks away. Josh, the lack of media coverage of this incident, the fact that this murderer was released over and over again after violent incidents, the whole thing is just so sickening.
Rita, I hate to say it, but the video speaks for itself. This is a black person who is murdering a blonde woman here, and that is not the kind of story here in American media that the media is typically going to cover very quickly. I'm sorry to just be so blunt and to say it like it is, but that is just the tragic reality. I guarantee you that if the roles were reversed here, and if this was a white person who was stabbing a young black girl to death there, that the media would be all over this. They would literally never let this story go. This is kind of just the DEI ideology at work. This is kind of just the neo-Marxism of oppressed levels, of people who are oppressed, people who are oppressors there. And if you take that logic to its logical conclusion, then you will actually find people who are ultimately trying to make justifications for violence. I don't spend a whole lot of time on Blue Sky, which is kind of where a lot of left-wing people went after Elon Musk bought Twitter/X. But I spent a little time on Blue Sky because I actually do value trying to understand where my political opponents are coming from there. There is an astonishing amount of violent rhetoric and outright explicit calls for political violence on Blue Sky. And generally speaking, the left is in a very, very, very dark place in this country there. Again, it makes me frankly very nervous in many ways. I'm not happy to report these news there. But I think that is kind of something going on here when it comes to the lack of media coverage as well. I think a lot of it is just the races, the DEI ideology at work there. But there's this kind of bloodlust for violence in certain very extreme corners. And if we know anything about left-wing media in the United States, and I assume Australia and various other first world countries as well, we know that the left-wing media, frankly, is disproportionately filled with these far-left people that are exposed to all sorts of violent rhetoric there. So it's a horrific, horrible story there. But tragically, Rita, I'm not exactly surprised at the lack of media coverage of it.
Now, there was an incident at a ball game in Miami, an incident that quickly went viral around the world. And there's a lot of feeling about what happened here. You've got a dad retrieving a home run ball. He proudly gives it to his son, and then he gets berated by a woman who felt the ball belonged to her because it landed closer to her. Have a look at this interaction. And yep, he gave the ball back. Let's have a look at a different angle and see what was actually said during that interaction. Josh, what are your feelings about that entire catastrophe? The woman was awful. That's a given. But should the dad have given that ball back? He bowed to a bully in front of his son. To me, that was also terrible.
No, it's inexcusable. It's absolutely inexcusable there. I mean, you're trying to set an example for your son. Look, I mean, Rita, we have a 9-month-old baby girl here. I mean, you know, these thoughts and feelings of trying to be a role model for your child are kind of fairly new in my young adult life. What I can tell you is that myself, when I was younger, my family growing up in New York State, we had partial season tickets to the old Yankee Stadium, the New York Yankees there. And I remember actually when foul balls would come close to our family seats, you know, my father, you know, really trying to kind of get in there and try to fight for the ball to give to my brother and I as a souvenir. It's very much kind of an American rite of passage. You know, this notion of trying to catch a foul ball, you give it to the kid's grinning ear to ear, raise it up, gets on TV. It's kind of like a culturally viral moment here. So for this father to at first succeed and to get the ball, and then just bow down to this reprehensible, you know, presumably kind of just, you know, radically far left woke bully. I mean, just awful. And look, I mean,
you know how she voted, Josh. You know how she voted. You don't even have to know. I can just tell by the glasses, the haircut, the attitude, and what we saw there. I would bet a house I know how she voted.
I would do the exact same thing there. But look, not a good look for this father whatsoever there. Hopefully he learns some good lessons going forward. And hopefully that young baseball fan, that young Philadelphia Phillies fan will get a foul ball souvenir sooner rather than later, whether it comes from his father or from someone else.
Well, I think the Marlins, it could have even been the team he was supporting, they did give him a big gift pack and they kind of tried to make up for that incident and have him leaving the game with a positive experience. But yeah, we're on the same page. I thought we might have a fight about that one because a lot of people were defending the father, saying, well, he was obviously so taken aback and, you know, you're not going to win if you don't give the ball back to a woman who's very much aggrieved. But yeah, I think that was giving in to a bully, not a good move. Josh Hammer, thank you so much for your time tonight.